Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, back with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are super excited to have Dr. Ashley Beckman on. She is down in Los Angeles, and she practices functional medicine, and I am going to let her introduce herself. Dr. Beckman, welcome to our show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. Yes, I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine, right, with a focus on epigenetics, and I infuse cellular detox epigenetics with Chinese medicine theory to create customized protocols for my clients and figure out what the root cause of their chronic issues are.
So let's talk about epigenetics since you talked about it, or since you mentioned it. What is epigenetics?
So basically, it's how our environment shapes our genetic expression, right? So we come in with a blueprint kind of how things could unfold, but everything that we do on a day-to-day basis can change that. So I think of it as sort of software for a computer, basically, right? So the food we eat, how we exercise, our thoughts, and basically to all the toxins and things in our environment can have a huge impact on what gets expressed with our genetic data and our history and things like that. And so, but to me, it's very important because it gives us our power back, right? Just because your parents had something doesn't mean that that is what is going to happen to you, because we know that we have a lot of power to change our genetic destiny. I think it's up to us to make those really wonderful choices, and it's on a day-to-day basis. So it does give us, though, a lot of information and power to make it different and really have flourishing health instead of just something that we think we might have because our parents or grandparents had it.
Well, and thanks for saying that, because I think we wrongfully are told a lot of times, or people at least think that, we can't change our genes or our genetics. And we can't change our genetics. That is true.
Right.
But we can change the way our genes are expressed, period.
Yes. Yeah. And people, a lot of times the reason people do have the same things as their parents is because their habits are passed down, right? You had a parent who loves, soda or candy or desserts. You grow up eating desserts, right? But you don't need to do that. We can make a lot of changes, and the information keeps changing so much, right? And so if we do things that are just healthier overall, and I talk to people a lot about their daily habits, and that there's often something in something that we do every day that has a huge impact, and we minimize that. It might be someone's, fake sugar in their coffee, right? And they're like, oh, it's just a little bit, but it's every day, or it's going to bed late every night. There are a lot of things that we have, and so that's something that I always ask my clients, because like I said, it's often in these sometimes little details that we can have a big impact when we shift it.
For sure. Janet, what questions do you have for Ashley?
Well, Ashley, I think we're kind of going against the grain of what, like Shawn is saying, that, what we think. And part of that could be just the advertisements that we hear, or going to our, practitioner that we have seen over the years, that we emphasize that, we're just going to have to live with it. But so the cool thing I'm hearing from you is that, little changes swing big doors, and that you're putting power back in their hands. So your practice setting must be slightly different. So explain to me and our listeners how you approach a client, because it sounds like you're spending some time with them. So what does that look like?
Yep. So usually when I work with clients one-on-one, basically it starts off with a 60-minute appointment where I want to get a deep dive into their history, their symptoms, kind of where they are now, what a lot of their habits are, the foods they eat, and the exercise, mindset, and let's see what else, family, stressors, old trauma, things like that. A lot of people focus, and myself, I'm included in this, we focus a lot on the toxins and things that we could be exposed to, but it's just one piece of the puzzle, right? It would be very easy to help people if you could pinpoint one particular issue or one trauma or things like that created this cascade of symptoms or created their chronic illness, but it's never that simple, right? So we're looking at kind of different layers, and in order to help someone, I want to get a really good overall picture of what their life is like now and their habits and what it has been like in their past too.
So that kind of gets down to a little bit of functional medicine and root cause medicine. Can you explain that?
Yep. So basically, there are certain things that our bodies can handle, right? And so in our current environment right now, there's so much stress, there's so many environmental toxins that we can't control just from our exposure in the world. And then there are a lot of things that we can control. So there are things like past trauma, environmental toxins, the food we eat, medications, and basically lifestyle practices that can help us pinpoint if something is going to be a little bit more negative or positive for your system. But usually what happens is we kind of keep, there's a theory of like a bucket, right? And so basically all these environmental toxins or emotional traumas, they keep filling your bucket higher and higher. And at some point your body might initially start off with just some unpleasant symptoms. It eventually starts to be something more problematic and could turn into more chronic diseases like autoimmunity or various types of cancer and things like that. And so what root cause medicine does is we want to pinpoint where these different things that have happened along your life that are contributing and how can we peel back those layers and address them, usually one at a time. Some overlap, but some don't, and really get to who you were before these things were happening and try to restore your health and vitality, prior to these instances, because they all have a lot of information and they really impact who we are and how our body is responding.
And how does Chinese medicine help you do that? And explain a little bit about Chinese medicine and how you were trained.
Sure. So a lot of people also don't realize how lengthy Chinese medicine degrees are. So my graduate program for Chinese medicine and acupuncture was 4 years full time. So no summers off, anything like that. And then I went back for an additional 2 years for my doctorate. So I studied healthy aging and longevity for my doctorate, and I wrote my thesis on epigenetics and specifically certain nutritional compounds on how they can be favorable for our genetic expression. But basically, the reason I love Chinese medicine is because it looks at all the people as we talk about, constitution, right? So everyone is individual. And the other thing that's very fascinating is they look at food and not supplements, but herbs and lifestyle practices. How is that going to impact the individual? And is it good for that particular body, right? So if the person's always cold, right? A lot of women are cold and a little bit, we talk about more on the deficient side where men, often they have more energy than women do. And they're they have energy that they could lose, where women, we're trying to gain energy. And so it's very interesting because we have a lot of foods and we look at that the same way. So that's why, so someone who's already cold all the time, the last thing they should be eating are smoothies and salads, right? Yeah. And that's pretty much the Western holistic nutritional diet, right? And especially if you look kind of like at veganism and things like that. So it's very deficient from our perspective in Chinese medicine. So, and the same, you have a guy that has a lot of heat, always sweating, so much energy, and let's say he's angry and irritable. The last thing he should be eating would be spicy food, which is going to create more heat and it's like gasoline on a fire that's already burning. So I love that because even in functional medicine, they are not looking at it at the same way with constitution. And this applies with intermittent fasting. I see all the time, right? Women are given these windows of eating that are the same as men. And that to me should be changed, right? And if you're already someone who's weak and tired, you really need to be very mindful of how you're doing intermittent fasting or keto or things like that. So I love it because it's another lens that I use to look at the person and figure out their specific protocol for them individually. Then I can add on their genetics, even more fine-tuned. And then I throw that in with how I would process and fill out their program for a pretty lengthy cellular detox from mold or if they have Lyme disease or whatever might be ailing them.
Well, and the hot versus cold example you just gave, I mean, that makes sense, but we just, I can honestly tell you, of all the functional medicine stuff that we practice, I never even thought about that, but it makes total sense.
It's as simple, even with, let's say you give someone, you say, or you hear, oh, have ginger tea for if you're sick, right? Or you have arthritis or whatnot. But ginger tea is warming. And for somebody that has a fever, that's not what we would use in Chinese medicine. You would
Right.
use a cooling herb, right? So it's really, I mean, to me, once I learned about this, and you learn that different, let's say, viruses or bacteria, they have a cold or a hot nature. You need to adjust the foods you recommend for the person. Like, would it be cold therapy or sauna, right? Heat therapy or
Yeah.
cold. It's very interesting to me because it's not actually being spoken of in functional medicine at all, unless you're a Chinese medicine practitioner. And there aren't that many of us that combine the two.
Yeah, well, thank you for that education. And speaking of smoothies, we have a comment from Lee Pence, and I know that he has a daily smoothie. So, Steph, can you go ahead and stream his comment? Let's see what he commented. What does that say? Atomic habits. Yeah, exactly. It's all about changing your habits. That's for sure. And Lee, you have an atomic habit of eating a daily smoothie. So,
Yeah. I would
kudos to
say,
you.
I would say make sure too, a lot of people get really stuck in having the same foods every day. And I'll give this example of my daily smoothie that I used to make 20 years ago. Then I realized that I was sensitive to almost every ingredient in there on some lab testing that I did because I never rotated it, right? I thought, okay, this is the best. I want to put everything I can in the smoothie. And it had frozen fruit, at the time, what was it then? Rice milk, right? Not so great for people, but that was the trend. Right? That was the alternative milk 20 years ago. And I had all this, hemp protein and oil and coconut oil, just everything possible. And it's really important for us to kind of keep our body on our toes, right? And so I tell people also make things simple, have a small handful of ingredients. The next day you change it. So if you really don't want to give up your smoothie, don't throw in like spirulina and bee pollen and hemp protein powder and protein, whey protein, which I don't suggest, but you know what I mean? Everyone, they put in everything. And I say, try to make it more simple so your body's not so confused as well. There's too many ingredients thrown at it.
I agree. And one of the problems with smoothies, and it works great for my good friend Lee Pence, but one of the problems with smoothies is you can load them up with everything, including calories. I mean, it is so easy to make a 600, 750 calorie smoothie. And so if people are really monitoring their calories, they think smoothies just automatically healthy, but you can load them up with calories. And I'm a big believer in not drinking your calories. It's pretty easy to go overboard when you're drinking your calories, whether that be soda, whether that be smoothies, or whether that be alcohol.
Oh, for sure. And pretty much those are all the things we're trying to get people off of, right? And not to consume. So, I mean, well, I do try to get people off smoothies unless it's the summer, right? Or you're somewhere tropical. But basically all of those things, nobody ever wants to give up or reduce very much sugar and alcohol. I'm sure you guys
have
heard that all the time.
Yeah.
And half the time I'm like, if you really want to, let's say people come all the time because they're in pre-diabetes range, right? And one of the first things I ask them is if they're drinking red wine. And a lot of people drink a couple of glasses or a glass. I'll just say a couple times a week. There are a lot of people who drink it pretty regularly, most nights, right? And that's the first thing I say is, we need to look at the alcohol you're consuming because you're getting all this sugar that you don't realize is sugar. And that is actually putting you in this pre-diabetes range. And some of those habits, you take just that one thing away and they're out of the range in 1 to 2 months.
Well, and it's more than, as you know, Ashley, it's more than just the sugar that's in wine.
For sure.
It's alcohol has so many.
And pesticides.
And it's just, and alcohol is a toxin, so our body has to deal with that as a toxin, and so that hampers recovery. It hampers our sleep. It hampers a lot of things. So alcohol, if you're having any kind of health issues, should probably go away.
Well, and also too, I am a big fan of I've used the Garmin watch to track tracked my system for a while, and I use the Aura Ring too. And I tell people, if you're using any of those, see how your body reacts on the stress level after a glass or two of alcohol, even wine, which, everyone thinks is, oh, it's healthy and, heart healthy. But if you look and see, your body is very stressed trying to process that alcohol. And especially it happens a lot in the middle of the night. You can see that your body doesn't get that recovery time. It's trying to process the alcohol for many hours after you've gone to bed.
Well, and one of the things that people say is that, well, alcohol helps me sleep. And it is seen as suppressant. So it does help you go to sleep, but it does disrupt your sleep later on that night.
Yeah.
So,
and it disrupts your body's ability to do all the things it needs to do at night while you're asleep.
To recover. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what we're really trying to say is that we need to stop bad habits and incorporate a variety to what we're doing rather than just being the same thing day in and day out.
Yeah, especially, and it goes for food. There are people that they like one kind of meat. So you eat chicken constantly, right? And it's the only thing. So I'm about making things a little bit more simple for your body to digest and process. And then also just rotation. You get different nutrients from different types of foods and even different nutrient profiles in various types of meat or in vegetables and things like that. And so it's good to rotate as opposed to throw it all in one giant stir fry with 8 types of vegetables, right? And then it's just difficult for your body.
Yeah, keep it simple. It's really that easy. And one of the things that Lee was talking about in his comment, Atomic Habits, him and I have talked frequently about the book. There's a book, I don't remember the author, called Atomic Habits. And it's just basically how you institute good habits into your daily routine. And once you have those habits, it sticks with you. And when you look at people that are successful with a diet, with an exercise program, athletes, successful business people, they have habits that they put in their routine every day.
And the thing is, too, is that it's also, again, there are usually, like I was saying, some habits that derail our potential for success or for feeling better. And so I kind of talk about those also in a different way of sort of like some foundational concepts in health that you really ought to have kind of nailed down before you're trying to figure out what's the best supplement for this and what should I take for these. Everyone wants something they can take, yet they're not very keen on my advice of getting to bed before, 11 at the max. So, and I prefer much earlier than that, but people have a lot of things that they do that are just habits that are not helping them. And definitely if you're chronically ill, not helping the situation at all. But we don't always, reinforce them because they seem so simple, yet most everyone ignores them, right? Like drinking enough water, good quality water, or going to bed at a certain time. And then another big one is just not waking up and instantly jumping on your phone, right? A lot of these things actually have huge impact, but they're dismissed very easily.
Right. Well, I'm guilty of that one. That's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is probably check my phone. And I have gotten away from that habit before. And it does.
Back in.
It helps relax you. It really does, because the phone is a stressor, because it reminds me of work and so there's always something there to keep me engaged. And so you need to disengage from your phone and get ready for the day before you even check your phone. I know some people that do that and they don't check their phone for an hour. So
yeah, I'm not there, but there are people, yes, that do that. And I think that it probably is really, really great for their nervous system.
So it looks like we have a comment from James Dunavant, also known as a healthy libertarian. What's he say? Body is working to detox the alcohol while people are usually not eating the best food with the alcohol. That is so true. Janet, you want to comment on that?
Oh, yes, totally. Because usually it skews your judgment. And so people just overeat for one. And, it is such a part of our American society that we, participated, and it's also accepted, So, it's very easy. And this time of year, wow, we're heading right into that, right? We're heading right into bad choices. I was just thinking about, all the cookies that get shared and all the desserts. And I personally love cookies. And so I don't have them in my house because that is a threat to my choices.
And her husband.
And and not to derail myself, I find that if I don't bring them in or make them, then the problem is solved, right? So, I think everybody knows to some degree, or probably wants to have to, or doesn't want to have to admit to what is the issue. But when you have, someone like yourself that's able to say, hey, this really is important, and let's, find a way to incorporate or eliminate. Because sometimes really, I mean, the longer I'm away from them, the better I feel. And, honestly, I can live day to day without it. It's not like it's going to, seriously, there's some things that are really worth not participating in. So, cookies is mine. I just don't. So
I'm surprised, right, how many patients of mine eat, I'm just going to give an example, eat Halloween candy, right? And they just say, oh, well, we still have it around, right? But that'll stretch for months and months. And I'm thinking, it's so bad for you. Like, you just throw it away. There's no reason you need to eat it for months because it's just not gone, right? Mm-hmm. So it's some of those things I think I also talk to people about, right? A lot of people start writing off their nutritional, like, good habits because they think, oh, from Halloween through New Year's, it's impossible. So I'm just not going to eat healthy. But I think that that's actually a really good time to kind of reevaluate and try to be a little bit more aligned with how you want to feel in the new year, because you will make better choices, and you might, have some things every once in a while, but that's not an excuse to me for 2 months of eating however you want, right? At every event that comes up.
Right.
That's me.
Yeah, for sure. So Ashley, give us a patient example of where you changed somebody's life.
One thing I would say a lot is I know you guys are up in Washington, but I was mentioning that so many of my clients are in Washington or other areas that are kind of damp, because I focus a lot on mold exposure and mold toxicity being a root cause for a lot of other conditions. And a lot of people, they don't ever come to me because they have mold exposure. They come to me because they have Epstein-Barr flare-up or just something that they can't figure out, right? Hashimoto's, things like that. So we look, and I look to see if mold exposure is a piece of the puzzle. And so often it is. And a lot of times it's like people would never have known that, and they've been seeing naturopaths for many years, never thought about it as a possible option or a piece to look at. And so one of my clients, JJ, she had all of these issues for many years, came to me for Epstein-Barr. And and basically she and her son and her husband, who's a firefighter, all had so much mold toxicity from their house that they weren't aware of. And it was creating all these different issues. And they had already spent many years looking for answers and weren't finding any, right? And because they were going down the wrong hole, right? So it takes so long to detox from it, but you start to get better and a lot of the symptoms go away. And a lot of people are just really, really sick. And when they don't know what it is or that it's coming from their home, sorry about that, it's really scary for them. So when we find that out, it's really important and helpful. And my point is I love working with families because then I've helped that child circumvent a lot of issues that they might have had.
And that's really getting to the root problem of it. There's a lot of things you can do to treat the symptoms that can happen later on, whether it be Hashimoto's or, some kind of autoimmune, but you got to fix the problem in order to make that go away, right? Or make it stop coming back.
Exactly.
So Ashley, what do you have a passion for as we wind this podcast up? What do you have a passion for?
So I've always been very interested in toxins. And so that started with environmental toxins, like in skincare. and beauty products and things that we actually do have control over what we purchase, right? So what I like to help people see is that we do have a big impact on what we choose to put on or in our body, right? And so that is something we can control as well. And a lot of people are completely unaware and assume that something is safe because it's sold or it's consumed regularly. Where this did interest me a lot with food, but I got way more into, I guess, the like environmental toxins or mold and things like that, because they have such an impact, and they are known for so many other kind of big diseases that will form later down in someone's life. But once we know better, we can make better choices, right? And so a lot of people, it's the same. Like, you hear things all the time like, oh, it's BPA-free plastic. And I'm like, no. All plastic is not good. So just because it's been marketed a certain way, people assume it's safe. And so my job is to try to make it somewhat easier for people to make better choices, to try to circumvent any sort of possible diseases in their future.
Yeah, speaking of the way things are marketed, I took a picture the other day at the store, and I shared it on social media, and it was Hershey candy bars, Hershey chocolate bars, and underneath it said gluten free.
Yeah.
And so, people think, oh, well, gluten free, it must be healthy. I mean,
Right.
that's a marketing ploy, and you see that with fat free. You see it with, I can't even think of some of the terms they use to market to us, where things they say are healthy because of little marketing terms like that.
Oh, it's crazy too, because they'll say gluten free and it's, corn chips or something. I'm like, it's naturally gluten free.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's good for you to consume, because
Right.
It doesn't mean non-GMO or anything, right?
Yeah, that's another
exactly.
one. Yeah, right. So, Ashley, what is the best way to get a hold of you if people have questions?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram quite a bit and try to give a lot of information that's just available for people. And that is Dr. Ashley Beckman. Sorry about that. And then my website is drashley.com. So I'm available on both of those. There you go. Nice. And it's pretty easy. There's just a very simple form if you have any questions about working together. I work with people privately, and I have programs and things like that. So there are a lot of different options.
And you do virtual appointments, correct?
Yes, all virtual. So
all virtual. Awesome.
It's lovely because it's open to everybody.
Yeah, awesome. That's awesome to hear. So, well, Ashley, thank you for being on our show today. You have helped us realize our goal, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So thank you for doing that.
Of course. It's my pleasure and my passion. So thank you so much for having me on.
And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in today. You don't want to miss out Thursday, because speaking of toxins, we have a guy, John Weinman, that was on the list for liver transplants because of alcohol, too much consumption of alcohol. He turned his life around by getting off alcohol and no longer had a liver transplant. I don't know a lot about the story. I'm going to learn just like you guys are. So stay tuned, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., our midweek podcast at Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, Pacific Standard Time. Looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching today. And thank you, Ashley, for being on our show.